computer. Okay, maybe that's all right. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so I do want to start out by saying that if I drop because of my bandwidth, then we'll try and get back in and I will continue with this. So we'll start with, I'm going to share my screen. And so this week, I want to talk about a couple of things. I do want to talk about what we're going to cover in D2L and what we're going to cover in Zybooks. So if you go to under content, we are in week 6. If you have questions on your midterm, you should email me. If you're not happy with your score, you should email me. We can always figure something out. It's all about trying to get better at what you're doing. It's not the end all of it. So the main thing that I want to start off with for this week is the Linux tutorials. Okay, so I edited this a little bit to show you, to add the importance of not just a PSU transfer student. If you plan to continue with CS at PCC, which is if you're going to go into 162 and 260, you really have to start working on Linux, because when you get to 162, 50% of your class is done on the Unix server, which means all your assessments or tests, your 4 of them, 50% of your grade, you need to do it all on the Unix server. So not just PSU transfer students. I'm getting a lot of mixed messages from students who have gone out and who are this term saying, well, you know, hey, I think this is a requirement only for PSU transfer students. That's not really true. I know that's how the notes started out, but you really must start working on these. So if you haven't, now is a good time to start. So there are 4 labs and those are mandatory for you to do. Just like Zybooks labs, you have to turn in these 4 labs with the rest of your assignments. If you don't turn in those labs, then I don't grade your assignments. That's part 1. Okay, part 2, if you don't practice on the server, you're going to go into 162 and you're not going to be able to do any of the assessments there. They are timed assessments, just like we have here. And for every concept, every 2 weeks, you have an assessment, right? And so you won't be able to do any of those if you don't start working on it now. Okay, with that said, it's all pretty simple. It takes practice, just like anything else. So you want to start with these videos that talk about how to log in, how to write C++ programs, how to use the script command. This is, again, something that's required in 162. I don't make you do that here, but actually you do that in the lab. I shouldn't say that. You do that in the lab. Shows you how to go into files that to transfer the files from the server to your desktop, and then you can upload it to your D2L. So we have short videos that go through all of these things. You must go through all of these and then go into lab 1. Don't go into lab 1 directly, okay? I also have here, if you click on that link that talks about the PCC Linux and Vim manual, you want to first start with this manual, and you want to go through this manual that talks about, you know, what is Linux? What do you know about Linux? And a brief intro. And the manual is really not very long. It gives you only what you need to know to get you started. So it's not super long. At the same time, it will get you started. So our server, it tells you how to log into the server. This is our server name. Okay, if you have a Mac like I do, then just go to your terminal. I'm going to show you a few things here. So just go to your terminal. You're going to just SSH into the terminal. Now, if you use a Windows machine, then you want to download PuTTY, and then you want to follow these steps. Okay, it kind of looks like this. You put in your information here, the cslinux.pcc.edu, and then you want to say open, and that will open the connection to the server, and then you can put in your credentials. And these were all emailed to you the first week. If you don't have it, then you should just pretty much follow this, which talks about everything. Student instructions document tells you, you know, all you need is your PCC login and your G number for the password. Once you're there, then you follow these prompts, and we talk about basic things. It's an operating system, okay? It's a command line based version of the operating system that we are working on, okay? Now, one thing I have found out as I'm going through, if you set the terminal type like it says on this page 6 to VT100, you will not be able to change any of your Vim settings. That's what I've found, okay? So if you put it to this and then you go into your, you know, VimRC, if you've explored into VimRC and try to change settings and make syntax on and do beautiful colors on your editors, it won't work. Just a word of warning. You set it to a different terminal. And there are different versions of that you can Google and find out. So once you are in, then you have everything done at the command line prompt. Forget your mouse, you start working on command line. So you can change your password using this command. You can work with directories, you can create directories. Now you must do these before you go into lab 1. Because when you go into lab 1, I don't show you how to make a directory, I simply tell you to CD to that folder. So if you don't already have this directory created, it's not going to work for you then. Okay, so these are some of the basic commands to make directories, to change the directories. Then we talk about how to create files. You make dir, you CD to that folder, you make a directory called assignment1. So you are essentially, organizing the things, your folders and your files. That's what we're doing. And then you write a short program, okay? And then you compile it, shows you how to compile. This is going into VI, basic VI. It shows you how to go into VI and how to, type in your code or whatever it is. So you have to really follow very carefully. Just insert header comments by typing I, followed by comments. And then when you're done, you hit the escape key. And so follow these. And here, I'm going to show you a couple of things while we are working on this. Here. So here is my terminal on the Mac. So SSH, and there are instructions for all of those things here in the manual if you go before and look at it. But we want to be able to do SSH with your name at cslinux.pcc.edu. And then if you have changed your password or whatever it is, type in your password. It should be your G number, capital G, with your number after that. Okay, so then I have a folder called 161B. So then you just follow these commands. Okay, so I change folder, and then I want to change, you do ls -l. It shows you all the folders in there, and all of that can be found in the manual. Okay, and then I have 4 folders. For labs, I have some samples. Here are some quick ways to do things. After you type in the first couple of letters, if you hit the tab key, it will fill in the rest of it depending on what other stuff you have in there, and have a whole bunch of files in there that we can look at. Okay, so follow these. It's all about practice, practice, and more practice. So for example, if I want to edit a file, let me look at sample A06, I think. So I type in VI at the bottom, notice SA, SA. So if I start with S and there are too many things, it says I don't know which one you want, then you give it one letter at a time, then it gets there. Okay, so there is A06 sample.cpp, and then you can look at it and you can see what all is in this file. Okay, so I've changed some of its settings. Notice at the bottom it says use J and K, so it doesn't, the up arrow and down arrow doesn't work because I changed some of my settings. Here's where we talk about how to open a file and read from the file and so on and so forth. Okay, so JK, J goes down, K goes up, and those are some settings that I have changed in the vimrc file. Okay, there's a configuration file. Now this part of it I don't have in the manual. So if I didn't :Q, it will quit. Do CD, enter, will take you to your home folder. Notice at the bottom, I'm going to clear so you can see the top of the screen. So this is my home folder. If you do PWD, it says home instructors, there's my name. In your case, it'll say home students, your name. Okay, and if you go to vi.vimrc, stands for Vim configuration file. There's my Vim configuration file, and I have a whole bunch of things that I got from somewhere else here for that. So it's at the bottom, goes up to the top. Notice we have a whole bunch of set statements that set certain things. If you do GG, it takes you to the top of the file. And I'm going to post some more notes on where to get these kind of configuration files. MIT has a free course on Unix just for CS students. It has too much information in it, but it shows you how to do basic configuration changes. So you can get your syntax on, you can get some different, color schemes set up and things like that. So anyway, go through some of these things, and you are not going to get everything the first week. Okay, so if you go here and if you go into your shell, let me go back into my D12. Okay, and if you go into your module 6, go into your assignment 5, look, there is a component for lab 1. Okay, there's a lab 1 document. If you click on that, it opens a document, and I have a whole bunch of instructions that pretty much walk you through what you need to do. Now, there's a video for it where I show you exactly how to follow these steps. So you don't really have to do anything on your own. If you follow the video and walk down this document, you will be able to do your lab. And here we talk about how to make folders, how to CD to that folder. But in order for you to do this successfully, you must be able to do this first step that says watch the videos in module 6 under Linux tutorials. So you must go through this before you start lab 1. So go through and watch all of these videos, go through the Linux manual and try to do the first chapter. Okay, so do the first chapter that talks about getting started, how to work with directories. Must go through all of that. Once you have gone through that, then you can come here and go through chapters 1 and 2, it says. So just follow the instructions in this. But again, be aware that you all must go through this in order for you to be able to continue and do the rest of the courses successfully. Okay, so follow these steps, and then we will come back to our terminal window in a minute. I'm going to go back to our CS161B. Again, you can continue and change to folders like that if you want to. And then we were looking at sample 06. We'll look at sample 06 in a minute as soon as we talk about this chapter, what we're going to cover in Zybook. So that's the part about Unix. Okay, so that's all I want to talk about today. But once we start writing code, we'll come back to this terminal. And if you're not able to log into your server, you must email me. You all have an account. Your accounts have been enabled, which I did the very first week of the term. You all have an account and you should be able to log into the PCC server. Okay, so try it and let me know. Okay, now we are going to talk about file input output. File input output, and if again, at the end of this, we'll talk about a few other things. Your final project, all of that is going to be based on file input output and structs, which we are going to cover in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so file input output, we talk about how to read and write from a file. It's very simple. So far, you have been reading stuff from console and you've been printing to the console. Now we're going to see how to read and write from a file. The key to reading and writing from a file is the file is plain old text file. You cannot read from Word documents. Any formatted documents is a pain to read because there are so many invisible characters that you cannot see. So all the time in these classes, I was going to say most of the time, but not really, all the time, we are pretty much reading from plain old text files, which means you need to be able to edit your text file using pretty much simple Notepad or VI on the Unix server. Okay, so here's an example where we have a myfile.txt with a variable number of just numbers, right? Okay, a few things you must know is just like you include IOStream for reading from console, you must include fstream. Most of the things for file input output is just following a set of rules. Okay, so just go back and follow each one of these exactly as it is in the sample program, and you'll get your program working for the most part. Okay, so you must include fstream, which is file stream. You must, unlike cin and cout, you get to create your own input file variable and output file stream variable. So ifstream in fs says create my own input file stream variable. And then we're going to use that to link it to the file. There must be some way you can link to the text file. So you can open this text file and read from it into your program, right? So in fs is the variable that gets created. Then on this line, you do infs.open and your file name. This is what links it to the text file. If the file is opened successfully, then we will never go into this if statement that checks to see if it is not open. Notice a not in front of it. If the file is not open, then we are simply saying, hey, I couldn't open it. There could be several reasons. Maybe your file was read protected. Maybe the file doesn't even exist. Whatever be the reason, if you cannot open it, you're going to output an error message. You're going to quit. If not, we will be here, and the file stream variable has been linked with this file. Now, you must know what is in the file. Remember, the computer doesn't know anything. You're going to teach it how to read from the file. You must know how you want your data in the file, how the data is in the file. It must be consistent data, meaning on one line, you cannot have numbers, the next line, you cannot have characters. If you say, I'm going to have a list of numbers, you must have a list of numbers. Okay, so what we are reading here is the file num, notice here, is just one integer. So we have just one whole number on each line in this text file. So what we are going to do is we are simply going to go through user loop, okay, and we're going to read one number from every line and do something with it. So we read the first number while if it's not equal to fail, or I would normally do while not end of file loop. If you look at all my samples, okay, while this is checking to see, it's just like not cn. Remember how you do the not cn to check if it's a character? So in case there's a character in the text file, then this is going to just fail at this point in time, which we never check for that, okay? Because if there's a character, there's nothing we can do about it. It's just going to output it, it's going to go on to the next one. So we are always going to assume that the data in our file is all going to be good. If the data is not good, then you have to just close your program and check it. Okay, that's right now, that's the way we work. So we would simply check while not end of file. We would go in, we would read each number and we would output it. That's all this is doing. Read a number, output it. Read the next number, output it. So this is the same. Remember, you've done this before. Instead of doing cin num, you're using infile infs num. Okay, and so all it does is reads it and it prints it with a prefix called num, and it prints the number that it reads, and then it's done. Now, for some reason, if the data in it was not good, then your program is going to crash. Okay, it's all about the data in the text file and what you know about the data. Notice in this case, here's another file which has a list of words. So we use a variable called string. We are not going to use any strings in this class, but you would just take this and make it in this course, right? We're going to change that to a char, right? It doesn't matter. And all it's doing is checking to see the frequency of each word, like how many times 20 occurred, how many times associable occurs, right? So again, you create your file stream variable, you see what all is in your file, what do you want to do with it? So I want to create one string variable so I can read each string. Then I create this word frequency so I can just check it and see how many times each word occurs. Okay, so every time I'll read the user word, I'll check it with the current word. If the word is the same, then I will increment its count, right? That's all we're doing here. Open the text file using infile.open or infs.open. If it is not open, you output an error message. If it is open, you come here, you read, oh, I see, this is reading a word from the user and matching that with whatever is there. So you read a word from the user, that is cn user word. Then you read the word from the file and you compare. If the word is the same, I said, okay, so you increment the frequency. So if the user enters 20, then you're going to say, hey, every time I see 20, I'm going to increment the counter, and 20 occurs 3 times. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Okay. So that's the basic. And then once you're done, you close the file. That's important. Okay. So that's the basics of reading from a file. Now, once you have figured that part, you can do lots of different things. You can read, and for example, you can store all these words in an array. Then you can go back and figure out the frequency of each word's occurrence, right? Then it's algorithm at that time. What do you want to do with it? I can read all these numbers into an array of numbers, and I can find the maximum in the array, the minimum in the array. I can do whatever I want to, the average of the items, right? So that's really where we are headed after this, okay? So go through the rest of these examples. I'm going to skip all this. I'm going to let you read it. Now, we are going to, how do you output from a file? Outputting from a file, again, you have an, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's see here. Okay, you have OF stream, just like IF stream. You have OF stream, output file stream. You create a variable called outfs, and you open a file where you want to output stuff in it. And instead of cout, you do outfs and output it to that file. But the key is to link it to the file first. So then after that, if you do outfs, it's going to take this text and put it out in the file. It's not going to be seen on the screen. Okay, so try a few of these things. We are going to be doing writing to a file, perhaps in your final project. Okay, so those are, again, these are all important concepts for you going forward into 162. Now, how do you pass these things to functions? File streams are always passed by reference. That's what this is talking about. When you pass, so here's an example. Here's my text file. It has some information on STEM majors. There's a major code. There's a major category. No, this is the name of the major. This is the major category. Total number of people, number of men, number of women, and annual salary. Okay, so this really should be, this is annual salary is one field at the end. Okay, so look at what all I have, and the data is consistent throughout. Okay, I cannot have bad data in there. If there's bad data in there, my program will crash. So every line has the same thing. The major code, which is a whole number, the major, which is a string, the major category, which is another string, total number of people, which is a whole number, total number of men, total number of women, and the annual salary. So you need to know what data is there in your file. And what I'm doing here is once I have that, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to have an integer for this. I'm going to have a char array for this, have another char array for this, a whole number, whole number, whole number, whole number. Okay. And go through the code very carefully. We talk about functions and everything in this. Okay. So how do you pass file stream variables? What kind of functions do I have to write? So notice here we start with IOStream, FStream, CString. I have a constant for the number of characters for each one of these char arrays. That's what that is. You all know MaxCar by now, we've used it. The first function is open file. Open file takes a file stream variable. Notice the ampersand sign, very important. A file stream variable can never be passed by value. A file stream variable must always be passed by reference, and then the name of the file. I open the file, and if the file opens successfully, it will return true, else it will return false. So take a look at the function. The file stream variable is created in main. So in main, I create the file stream variable. I create all my char arrays. One is the file name, one is the high major. So what I'm really doing in this is I'm going through my text file. I am trying to do a little bit of data analysis. I'm looking through all my annual salaries and trying to find the major that has the highest salary. Then I think I'm also trying to find total number of men and women separately in the engineering category, health category, and biology and life science category. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the category. If it is engineering, I take the total number of men and add it to a cumulative counter. Every time I say engineering, I add the number of men to that cumulative counter. So at the end of it, I'll say, hey, in engineering, you have a total number of that many total men, this many women, right? So you can do lots of data analysis. You don't need to store this whole data. You just need cumulative sums. Okay, and these are all good exercises with loops and functions. So I don't, again, you have to figure out the design, what you want to do, and then create only the appropriate variables, right? So the high major is essentially a char array that's going to keep track of the major with the highest salary. That's really what that is. So I read the file name from the user. Then I call this open file function. And since it's a Boolean function, I call the function right here in my if statement. If it returns false, that's what this is saying. If it returns false, then I'm saying file did not open, I'm going to quit. Else, we call the next function. So the function here, open file, says, here's the file stream variable that got created in main. It's coming in by reference because when it goes back, it has to be linked to the file. So I open the file name is again coming from main. I ask the user to enter the file name right here. You read it and it comes here. You try to open the file. If the file does not open, I return false, else I return true. And I check it here. If the file does not open, if it returns false, then I'm going to quit. Else, I call the next function. Else, the in file is now linked to my file. Remember, that's what we did here. It's linked to my file. My file is open. I send that file stream variable to men count. Men count takes the file stream variable. I create some local variables, one for the major category, which is a char array. Now, here is where students get very confused. I have a discard variable. It's just a single char variable called string discard. And what I do is we essentially discard the things that I don't need. Okay, Okay, so let's start from here. And then I have some integers. I have men, I have total engineering men, health men, and biomen. So I'm going to check the category. If the category is engineering, then I will take the men and add it to engineering men. If the category is health right here, then I take it and add it to health men, right? So I'm doing a cumulative count. Now, how you read from the file is very important. So here I have int discard is just a random variable that I created because I don't need all this data that I'm reading. So for one line of data, look at it. If all I want to do is look at the category and count the number of men, I don't care about the major code. I can discard it. I don't care about the major name. I can discard it. The only thing I need is this major category, which I read into my char array called major cat. That's why I have that char array, okay? And I don't care about the total number of people. I care about the men. So anything that I don't care about, I'm just going to read into that discard variable and throw it away. Anything that I need, I store it in a valid variable. So men gets read into men, everything else gets thrown away. Watch. And again, the way you read from a file, how does it know to go from one data to the next? It's just like you read from your console. When you use the extraction operator, which is this greater than sign, it stops at the space. So in file, int discard reads the first number, which is this. And of course, when it hits a space, it's going to stop reading. So I'm going to read this into int discard, and I'm not going to do anything with that variable. I'm just going to leave it, okay? That's what we're doing here, int discard. Then I read into string discard. Okay, string discard is the next. I'm not sure this would actually work. This should be a char array. I'm going to edit this right now because that code is not going to work. What I have created here, if you noticed, is not a char array. It's a single char variable. This really should be a char array because I'm reading the whole string and discarding it. Okay, so string discard is the next data, which is my major name. I don't care about the major name. So I read it into what is called a string discard. Now, here's the next question. How do you know? How does it know to throw it away? It doesn't know any of that stuff. Watch. We read the next data into major cat, which is my char array. I want to keep it. So I read it into something that makes sense to me. How do I know how to keep it? We'll see. Now notice here, I read the major code into int discard. I use the same variable to read the total number of people. So we are overwriting that variable, right? I use the same variable to read this total number of people. So when I keep overwriting the variables, that means I don't really care about that data. I read it into that variable. Then I read men, the number of men, into a meaningful variable because I want to keep it. Then I read, I think this is the number of women and the annual salary all into the same variable. See, I'm overwriting the same variable and I'm never going to use the data in this variable because I don't care about it. Okay, so then all I care about is this major cat and the number of men. If string compare of major cat and engineering equals 0, that means if major cat was engineering from this data, let's see, we're reading one line of data. If it's engineering, then I'm saying take the men and add it to engineering men, which starts at 0 for me. So the first line, one line at a time. From the first line that I have read, I have checked to see if the major categories engineering, I take the men and add it to engineering men. No, if it is health, then I take the men and add it to health men. So I have 3 variables that keep track of the total number of different categories of men: engineering men, health men, and biomen. So then I go through this loop. So that's what this loop is all about. I read the first line, I categorize the men, I cumulatively add, then I go back, I read the next line. So imagine an invisible cursor reading each one, moving through. At the end of the annual salary for the first line, it'll go back to the while loop. It will read this and it will see if it is end of file. If it is not, it will continue reading. And until it gets to the last line of data. Once it gets there, it's going to stop because there's no more data, right? And so what I've been doing is I've been taking this men and adding it, taking this men, if the category is health, I add it to health men and so on. When I come out of the loop, I'm going to say, hey, number of men in engineering is this many, number of health men is that many, and number of men in bio and life sciences is that many. Okay, so just analyzing data, okay? Infile.clear, remember seeing that clear? Resets your infile variable seek G of 0 takes the cursor back to the beginning. Remember, we've gone through the whole thing and the cursor is sitting at the very end of the last line. We somehow must rewind that cursor, take infile all the way back to the beginning. And I can call my next function called women count, which starts at the top again. This time, I have different variables, the same variables really, but instead of men, I'm calculating women, engineering women, health women, and bio women. So you choose what to discard and what not to discard this time. So we still discard the first major code. We still discard the major category. And I keep the category. I'm sorry, I discard the whatever the second is, which is the major itself. And then here's the category. I discard men this time. I discard total and I discard men. Then I keep women and I discard the annual salary. So all we are doing is picking and choosing what we want to keep in this particular program. I don't want to keep everything, right? I only want to keep certain things. I pick and choose and throw away the rest of the data. Okay, so this will calculate the total number of women exactly the same way I did the number of men. Then I clear and seek G and take it back to the beginning. And then here is the next function that finds the highest major. Now, again, I choose to discard different columns of data. I discard the major code, but I do not discard the major because I want to see which major, which is my unique field, has the most pay. So I want to keep the second column of data. So I read the second column of data here. I throw away the category this time. I don't need that. I throw away the total number of people, the total men, the women, all of that doesn't matter. I only want to keep the annual pay. So I put that into a meaningful variable. Then you know how to find the maximum. I have a max pay equals 0. I set that to the first value, or it should really be set to the first value in the list. And then you just go through this loop and say, if max pay is less than annual pay, then max pay becomes annual pay that you read from each line, and also save the major, because I want to be able to say, petroleum engineering has the most pay, which is 110,000 or whatever. Okay, so you've done this again, you know how to do this. You're not storing an index because there's no array, but I'm copying the major name into a char array called high major, which comes in by reference, by the way. That was the one I created in main that I sent over here. And then if you go back to main and call each function, you can print it out. Okay, does that make sense, you guys?
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right, so that's what we're talking about here. We haven't stored any data in the arrays. We really have just gone through and categorized, just done analysis, okay? I have a whole bunch of other sample programs that you can look at where I read from files. Here, again, we are separating the data just by spaces, right? The name of the person, some kind of a salary, and a raise, a bonus, or whatever, percentage. So you need a char array for this, you need a whole number for this, and you need a double for this to calculate the increase in pay. So you declare all those variables, you declare your file stream variable, and in this case, I'm calculating something and I'm writing to the output file. So I'm calculating each person's salary and outputting to an output file in this case. Okay, so you open the input file first, you check to see if it opened. Then you open the output file, a different output file. Don't open an input file and output file to the same thing in this case. Sometimes you might want to do it, but if you do it, then remember, if you open it in this mode, it's going to overwrite everything in your input file. So you have to watch out for that. Check if the output file opens. If neither one of the file doesn't open, then you want to just quit. Then you are going to do all your manipulators to out file, not to see out. Anytime you want to write to a file, you have to do everything with respect to the out file. Then you read whatever is there in the right order. I have name first, then I have salary, then I have race. So read it in the right order. Because it's separated by space, you can use the extraction operator. Then you calculate the total pay for each person, and I put it into a variable called total pay. I'm not storing it anywhere. I'm simply outputting it to a file. Notice, each line, I calculate the total pay and I output it right away. I'm not storing it in a list. There's a difference. Okay, I don't have an array. It's just calculating and outputting. That's it. At the end of the program, I've lost each person's total pay. I haven't saved it. Okay, then you close both the files. So far we have only seen data where we have not stored anything in arrays. We're just reading, doing some analysis and printing, and we're done. And this does the same thing. Calculate each person's total pay. I'm not sure what exactly we're doing. Oh, this is broken down into functions. That's the only difference. It's the same thing, but I have a file to open the input file. I have a file overloaded function. One takes, they're both called open file. One takes IF stream, one takes output file stream. Opens the file and then read the data, do some calculation, print it, close the file. So main just calls a whole bunch of functions. Okay, all right. So for today, actually, I'm going to, the only other thing to cover in this chapter would be reading and storing into arrays. Perhaps we'll talk about that as well, because then you can go on to do your assignment. So the data, so far what we've done, if you remember, we didn't store into any arrays. We did the data analysis and we just printed out. Now the same data here, notice the same kind of data, name, salary, race. What if I want to store everything? So watch this video. I pretty much go through it and talk about the same thing that we're going to talk about now, but it'll be good for you to watch that. How do you store it into arrays? And remember the multiple arrays we talked about, parallel arrays, right? So to store data like this, you need 3 arrays. One is an array of strings or an array of char C strings. Then you need an array of ints and you need an array of doubles. So that's what I'm doing here. If you go here, notice I'm creating a char array of names. And this now, here's where the 2-dimensional C strings become important. So if you missed it, you should go back. You should go back and watch list of C strings, 10.8, very important. How do we get a list of names or a list of something? You need a 2-dimensional char array for that, okay? So you are going to go through this section first to figure out why do I need a 2-dimensional char array versus a single dimension char array? And this video will walk you through that. And here is the same thing. Notice 5 names, 10 characters each, okay? So go back and figure that out first, because then when you come back here and you look at the sample, it'll make a lot more sense. So this one column of names is represented by this char array, 2-dimensional char array. Capacity says how many rows, max car says how many characters for each name. So I could have 20 names, whatever my cap is. My cap is set to 100. So I could have 100 names, each name having 101 characters. That's what that says. Okay, then we need the salary. I saved it as a double. So each one of these is a double. So I have a column of double. I have another column of double for the race. So that's where this comes from. Double salary equals 0. Double race equals 0. I calculate the total pay in another array. So I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 parallel arrays to keep track of the names, their salary, their race, and their corresponding total pay. Now I'm actually storing the data in arrays. So I start a count at 0, okay, because I don't know how many lines of data I have in the file. I'm going to count it as I'm reading from the file. I tell the user to enter the file name. After this, I use scene.getLine. Don't use extraction operator. It's good to use scene.getLine, unless your data is separated by space, which in this case, all this data is separated by space. So then we use the extraction character because it's easier. Open the file, check to see if it opens. I call the open file function, which automatically checks. This is a little different. If the file doesn't open, I quit. I completely quit the program. That's what that does. Then we call the read data function that takes my in file and all these parallel arrays. Okay, so read data takes all these arrays. It starts with my count at 0. My count says, okay, I haven't read any lines so far from the file. And notice I use the same count as a subscript. We've done this before. Your size starts at 0. You're reading from, it's the same as keeping track of the number of elements. right? We've talked about this before. The capacity may be 100, but I don't have 100 elements in the array. So count starts at 0. I read from the first line in the text file into names at position 0, salary at position 0, race at position 0, calculate the pay, put it in position 0, then increment count, and go and get the next line of data, and keep doing that until you have read all the lines of data. At the end of the file, count will give you the number of lines in the file. You don't want to go into the file and read count manually. That's bad, because how do you know? What if you had 2,000 lines, right? So you don't want to do that. Okay, so we have read, we have calculated the total pay, we have incremented count. That the job is done. You close, you return count, because notice it's an int function. You return count, and in main, you receive it. Say count equals read data. So if you had 15 lines in your file, count should be 15. Then you turn around and send that to your print data. Print data, if you notice, look at my prototype, I have 2 print data functions. They are both overloaded. One just takes the name, char array, the pay, and the count. Okay, I'm not printing all the information. I'm printing just the names and the total pay. And the count tells me how many lines I have, right? I need the count. Print data, the other function says, take the out file stream variable so I can output to a file. I'm not outputting to the console. So it's an overloaded function because the names are the same, the parameters are different, right? Okay, so print data here, the one that does not have the file stream variable, goes through a for loop, because once you have the count, you know, the array is all the same. You go through a for loop and you print the name and you print the total pay, separated by semicolons, doesn't matter. And then the next one, instead of doing C out, you do out file and you print to the file. So when you're done with this, you should have a text file called output.txt. You should take this code and put it on the server or Replit and try it out. You should be able to see an output file that has the data that you told it to print in this, which will be the names and the total pay. Okay. All right. So let's look at a sample on the server now that we've done this. So here is, let's see if it still works. Okay, it still works. That's good. All right. So in here, I have a sample for assignment 6. Now, the assignment 6, by the way, let's look at the assignment before we actually talk about the sample. Do you guys have any questions so far? I see Gamaliel and Drew came in. How are you guys doing? Okay, so I'm going to go into assignment 5.
Sorry, I'm good. I was on mute. I just got home from work. I figured I'd just jump in and,
Yeah.
you know, take the
Yep.
chance to actually join one of these.
Yeah, good. Yeah, you might want to go back and watch the beginning of it. I basically just talked about the Linux server, and then we've been going through Zybooks. And then, so here is your assignment 5. Assignment 5, here's where you get to have, you know, your own data. 5 and 6 are all actually 5, 6, and your final project can all be done with the same data file. So if you haven't been thinking about your final project, now is a good time to start thinking about it, because what I ask you to do here, and I'm going to show you my sample, I tell you to come up with your own data. Okay, so far as you've seen, it's all about reading data from the file, right? Like all these samples that I have, we are doing some kind of data analysis. And if you look at the labs, they also follow some kind of data from a text file, right? For example, this lab has a whole bunch of, if you look at this text file, it has some strings and some numbers, and you're going to do some kind of data analysis on how, you know, how much you spend in a week and how much you spend over the weekend and whatever, some kind of analysis. So if you look at your assignment 5, I say, pick your own data, whatever you want. What I have in my sample is a simple items.txt file. The items.txt file, all it has is a list of item names, quantity, and calories. Okay, and notice here, the item names are separated by semicolons. So you do want to go through the Zybooks example where I talk about how to read data. So far, we've read data separated by space. It's a little tricky. You want to be able to go through and look at this example, assignment sample and video that talks about how to read data separated by semicolons. So if you look at items.txt, the same thing that we just looked at, it has the same file, right? And here's the example that talks about how do you read data separated by semicolon. Okay, I will show you that example in a minute. But going back to our assignment, you must start out by doing that Linux Lab 1 that we talked about. Watch the video, do the lab. Get some kind of data. There's a sample website. You can get, I don't know, students have done all kinds of things. You can get movie names, books, songs. Don't go crazy. Don't have like 10 attributes because then it gets harder because then you have to create parallel arrays for all of that. That's why I have only like 3 or 4 columns of data would be good. Keep your data set simple. Otherwise, it gets hard. You must have some data with char arrays. Don't just have data with numbers. That's not going to cut it because I said you must have some char arrays. Your data must be separated by semicolons. Okay, have data separated by semicolon. If you're not sure, let me know. Check out sample assignments 5, not 6, 5, which we're going to look at right now. Okay, what must your file do? You must be able to open from the file, read from the file, do some kind of data analysis. You know, like the examples that I showed you. Can you find the average of a list of numbers? Can you find the average of a list of ages? What I'm doing in my program is I'm finding the item with the most calories or something like that. And I think I also find the average calories, something. We'll take a look at it. Some kind of analysis from a list of data is what I'm doing. So do some kind of data analysis and the labs go over all this. This is pretty much what you're doing in this week's lab. So if you do the lab first, and if you look at my sample, that will help you figure out what you want to do for your assignment. So it's a free form assignment. I'm not telling you what exactly, which data set to use. You pick your own data. This is, for example, this is that STEM, this is some kind of data from automation, AI, whatever that talks about occupation names, how many are employed and how many will be automated and things like that. So this is an example. Don't use this. Here's my sample that look at the design document. Let's look at that first. That'll give you an idea of what I'm doing here. So this program reads from items.txt, prints the total calories of each item because I have quantity and calories. So if it has 3 apples, and I say, well, 3 apples totally has, I don't know, 300 calories. If each one has 100 calories, something like that. It uses the concept of parallel arrays. It uses 2-dimensional char array and a 2-dimensional int array. Why 2-dimensional int array? Because my items.txt has, first of all, the name has to be stored in a 2-dimensional char array. Go back to your char arrays chapter and look at the C strings, how a list of C strings is stored. Then I have 2 whole numbers. Instead of storing them in 2 separate int arrays, I put it in a 2-dimensional array, int array with 2 columns, 1 column for quantity and 1 column for calorie. That way, you don't have 3 parallel arrays. You only have 2 parallel arrays. One is a 2-dimensional char array and the other is a 2-dimensional int array. And it also shows you, good example to show you how to pass 2-dimensional arrays to functions, okay? So look at my sample run. I say, welcome to my program, blah, blah, blah. I print everything from my file. And the way I print it is I say, well, this milk has a total of this many calories because I pretty much took my quantity and multiplied it by the calories for each one. And so it prints it out. And then I also went on to find who has the maximum calories. So I said the item yogurt has the maximum number of calories at 1,000 calories, some kind of calculation. So what is the input? The text file. What is the output? I'm calculating max cal and the item name as string. Pretty much this is it. This is a list, which is the output, and the maximum, whoever is the maximum, right? So put your output, whatever calculations you need. What all are we doing here? I have a function to open the file and checks to see if the file opens, returns true or false. Load data. Remember, again, you can write this in plain English. You don't need to give me square brackets and things like that. Notice none of that stuff that I have here. I simply said you take the file stream variable, the char array for the list of items, and the two-dimensional int array as parameters, declare count locally because I'm returning count at the end, read the first item, check to see if it's not end of file. Once you've read the name, you read the quantity into the quantity column of the two-dimensional list, read the calories into the calorie column. So really into column 0 and column 1. That's all I'm saying here. So this will go into column 0 of the two-dimensional array. This will go into column 1 of the two-dimensional array. Increment count, read the next item, loop until end of file, and finish it and return count. So you can do it all in English. You don't need to have any syntax, right? So when you're done with this function, all the data has been loaded from the file into those two arrays. Then you turn around and send the two arrays with the count to a function called calcalories, which simply goes through a for loop, takes each quantity, multiplies it by calories, and actually I'm just printing it, I think. Yeah, display each item and calories. I'm not even storing it. Okay, so I display each one after I calculate it, and I'm done. And I'm also, as I'm going through, I'm also finding the maximum calories. I don't need a separate function for it, but you could, but I don't. So in the same function, I set max cal to the first item, and then I go through and say if the calorie is greater or lesser, however you do the comparison, calculate your maximum calories and set the corresponding item name as you find the largest. Every time you're storing the item name as well. So I can actually say, hey, yogurt has the maximum calories, something like that. Then in main, you declare all your arrays and you pass them to functions. Okay. All right. And then the code looks like this. And I'm going to try and use the server after this, a06.cpp, and you have access to this code. You can download it, take a look at it. Notice I have two constants, one for the number of items, one for the max car, open file, load data. Notice how it takes the two-dimensional array. And notice how we pass a two-dimensional array. You don't have the number in the first square bracket. This is very critical. Otherwise, it'll give you error messages, right? There's no number in the first square bracket, but there is a number in the second square bracket. Same thing for the integer two-dimensional array. This function returns the integer. So it's an int function. The next function is a void function. It simply calculates the calories and prints it out. Okay. So in main, you declare your two-dimensional char array. You declare your two-dimensional int array. Notice I only have two columns, one for quantity and the other for calories. That's it. Then I check to open the file. I check. If it doesn't open, I quit. I call load data function. I send the two arrays. It returns the number of items I read from the file. That goes into size on the left-hand side. And then I calculate the calories, and my main ends pretty much. And then if you look at the functions, open file just opens the file and checks to see if it opened, go through the while loop. And again, in the while loop, notice again, the same fence post concept. You read one line outside using get line. This is how you read separated by semicolons, right? You use the get line, tell it to read until the semicolon into this char array called items of size. Items is the name of my char array. And then you check to see if it's end of file. If it's not end of file, you read into the int array. The quantity gets read into int array into column 0. And then you must ignore the semicolon that is there after the quantity from a text file. Then you read the calories into column 1 of the same two-dimensional array. Size has not gotten incremented yet. We are still in position 0. After the quantity, you ignore your new line. Remember, at the end of the line in the text file, you have new line. Increment size because the first line has been done. Read the next name to sustain the while loop and keep going until the while loop until there's no more data in the file. And then return size. And then turn around and send that to calcalories and calc calories will go through. You're simply going to go through a for loop because now you've loaded everything into the file, into the arrays. And then all you have to do is just go through a for loop and calculate your total number of calories. Okay, so really that's all you need to do for your assignment as well. Have a data file and go through and calculate, something that you want to calculate. So, pretty much that's really all there is in this week's material. So what I would like you to do is go through this, see what questions you have, and your final project is kind of starts off with this idea. So you have a text file, you're going to read from it, you're going to do something with it, you're going to present a menu to the user. And so perhaps on Thursday, we can talk more about the final project and how all of these things will come together. So what do you guys think? Do you have any questions on that so far?
No, I don't.
No.
But I missed most of the meetings. So.
That's all right. You can go back and watch. I have recorded it. It might take me a couple of hours to post it because I recorded on my computer. For some reason, it wouldn't record to the cloud from here. I'm not sure. But
No
I will
worries.
post it. Yeah. So just go back and I think watching it and just going through the whole thing will help.
Yeah, I'll watch it tomorrow for sure.
Yeah. Yep. All right. How about you, Gamaliel and Preet?
I feel pretty good about it.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna stop recording for